Okay, we can get started. So this is a getting started with infrastructure workshop with Pulumi. It is designed to be a level 100 workshop. So it will very much get you understanding the basics of how to create infrastructure as code with Pulumi. It is not designed for advanced use cases. So there are some advanced use cases available in the repository, like creating serverless applications and also creating Kubernetes-based applications. But today we're going to focus on three main specific topics. One, just getting started with the tool and understanding the paradigm shift that will allow you to create your infrastructure with real code. Two, we're going to create some compute instances, some virtual machines. We're going to add some loops in there so that we can take advantage of like basic programming constructs and understand what's going on. And three, we're actually going to like deploy a Fargate-based setup in Amazon so that you can actually deploy containers and understand how that actually works together. For those who don't know, Pulumi is an infrastructure as code tool that effectively allows you to understand what is happening through the paradigm shift right now. So I have a few slides and then we can go straight to the labs. So we're very much going through the transition of the cloud right now. And we have different people at different levels of the transition. And we have, at Pulumi, we've sort of broken this down into three different levels, okay, three versions of the cloud. You have the first wave, which is V1. And this is like people who have picked up a data center effectively and moved it to the cloud, where you have very traditional N-tier style architecture, where you have a cluster of application servers and you have a cluster of database servers. And you're not taking advantage of any real sort of different pieces of the cloud. And you're not taking advantage of any real sort of software as a service or platform as a service that's happening within the cloud. Then we have the V2 style architecture, where we start to break it down. It's less monolithic. We probably start to bring in containers into what's happening. And we've probably taken advantage of some other tools, some software as a service like monitoring tools or database tools or so on and so forth. And then we have the V3 style architectures. And our V3 style architectures are very much connected architectures where we take advantage of a lot of the different pieces of the cloud and what's going on. And we can understand what all of the different pieces come together. We've got very connected services, and we're probably taking advantage of schedulers, and we're probably taking advantage of like container engines and Kubernetes or other different pieces. And different people have different levels that they're at right now. And I'm not saying that everything you should be is like level 3. It's a case of what Pulumi allows you to do is to do every piece of it, but we very much excel in level 3 because we have created a lot of API helpers that make life a lot easier around Kubernetes and serverless and so on and so forth. Now, for us, Pulumi is like a way for us to deploy your infrastructure as real code. So you can write it in general purpose languages. Right now, we support TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, and we have 2 languages that are in preview. They're not fully general availability yet, and that's Go, and it's anything in the .NET ecosystem. So that's C#, F#, and VB. We very much, because we're code, we allow you to like be able to have familiar software engineering techniques around testing and versioning of your code. And we can help you enable continuous delivery workflows in your systems. One of the things that we're actually moving into in the future is we allow you to enforce policies around your code so that you can actually ensure that security is embedded inside your system. So you can stop people creating infrastructure as code that is open to the public internet with S3 buckets, or have incompatible versions of databases, or don't have things like cost allocation tags and so on. And then lastly, we believe that because we're using real tools, we're actually giving each team the ability to create the tooling in the languages that they understand themselves. So what is infrastructure as code? If you're new to infrastructure as code, it can be classed as, it is a way of being able to program your code, not doing anything manually, So to eliminate error-prone changes, you get to actually have previews, you get to have code reviews, but more importantly, it's automated and repeatable, and it will give you predictable changes every time. We as humans make mistakes. We as humans continually cut corners. And because we do that, sometimes we don't always do the best things in order to get it. Machines will be able to run the code again and again, and they will be able to do it in exactly the same way each time. And we should actually be able to get an understanding of what is going to change. So for us, this is modern infrastructure as code. Up until now, infrastructure as code has usually been with tooling like YAML or JSON or DSLs, custom DSLs. Now we're actually allowing you to use these real languages. So you can understand abstractions, you can use your favorite tooling in there, you can preview your changes, you can have your CI/CD pipeline, you can actually get the information from your previews into your CI/CD, and you can start to embed sort of chat up style information in here. So for us, we're moving modern infrastructure as code. For us is probably better known as infrastructure as software. So we can start to test, review, follow all the best development practices that developers have been using for a long, long time, and embed those inside their development workflow for your infrastructure. So Pulumi has a number of different things. Let's start from the bottom and work our way up. Pulumi has a number of providers. So the providers will interact directly with the cloud. So you have providers like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, New Relic, Datadog, OpenStack, DigitalOcean, VMware, so on and so forth. And then based on top of those, we have a collection of libraries. So these are specific libraries that are helper methods, helper libraries that allow you to do things in a more efficient, more simple way. And then because we've learned from the libraries and patterns, we've actually created these ideas of frameworks called Pulumi Crosswalk. So Crosswalk for AWS, we believe, is the simplest way in order to deploy things like ECS or EKS. And it is a very opinionated API that adheres to AWS best practices that allows you to do things in a very simple, very easy way. So for example, if you were to create an AWS VPC and all of it, a network, a VPC network using traditional tools, you would have to do things like a VPC resource, subnet resource, route tables, route table associations, routes, internet gateways, NAT gateways, public IPs, and so on. Pulumi Crosswalk can allow you to do that in just a few lines of code. We have also created this idea where Pulumi Crosswalk is for Kubernetes, and we can look at that in a further workshop. So infrastructure as code, for us, there's a few key things. Firstly, we are declarative. We may not look declarative because we're using imperative languages, but we are a declarative setup. So you actually define end source at the end state of your resources in your code. It just executes it using imperative languages. Two, we can actually introduce conditions and loops into your code, and you don't have to write custom logic. You can take advantage of the real language constructs and the language frameworks in order to do this for you. We have multi-provider workflows, so you can actually chain workflows together where you can start to create AWS or Azure or GCP infrastructure and then deploy or configure your Kubernetes instances on top. We have reusability, so you can package all of your providers up, or you can package all of your APIs up, or different layers of your infrastructure up, and you can share them across your company. We allow test-driven infrastructure, so you can actually write real unit tests which do not talk to the cloud, and it will allow you to verify that your code works before you even start to interact with the cloud. And we have advanced orchestration. So this is where the power of the real languages come in. So in the example in front of me, what we're actually saying is that we want to deploy 3 replicas of a canary application. When they have been deployed, we can create the code that allows us to talk to our monitoring tool. In this case, it would be Prometheus. We can check that everything is as expected and that the application is continuing to work. And then once we're happy and the check comes back as passing, we can continue deploying the rest of the replicas of our application. We're real code. Because we're real code, we can talk to APIs, we can talk to any SDKs that exist, and you don't have to write your own APIs that talk to them. Anything that has an SDK or an API, we can actually import and we can talk to from the code itself. So before we get started with the labs, there is something to talk about and how an organization, how things are broken down inside Pulumi. So when you sign up at Pulumi, you get an organization. And inside organizations, you have a number of projects. And inside a project, you have a number of stacks. So you can think of stacks in terms of an API, or excuse me, an environment. So you can say a dev stack, a test stack, a staging stack, a production stack. But you can also think of stacks as each individual developer can have their own stack. So a stack is a way of being able to segment the deployment of infrastructure and the actual, manage the state of the infrastructure, and it's all using the base infrastructure. So let's say 5 members of a dev team. We know that we have to all use the same style infrastructure, but each of us need to be able to test independently. Developer 1 would have their own stack and would be able to bring that stack up and down independently of developer 2, but they would all be using the same base code. So this allows us to be able to segment, and we actually be able to architect our code in a nice way so that we can talk to each other going forward. So I'm going to stop talking because it's boring everyone, I'm sure, and we can start to look at the labs. So the labs that we're going to look at today are in Pulumi Infrastructure as Code labs. And if you can go to that repo, and you will be able to see that we have 4 getting started resources for AWS. So we have labs for TypeScript, Python, Go, and C#. I'm interested to see if anyone wants to tell us, or excuse me, if you could put in the chat what language you will be using. And it will be interesting to see how these different things happen. So there's a number of questions that I'm just going to address first right now. And what about Azure? So we do support Azure. This is a question by Miroslav. Right now, we have 1 set of labs in Azure, which will be C# based, but very soon this repository will have all of the labs for all of the languages available. We just haven't managed to get there right now. And if you have the same principles will exist for all of the languages. So if you even just follow one of the AWS examples, you'll be able to see how we build it up and how we do different things. I'm not sure why people cannot unmute themselves. So Thomas Leko, I will send you some AWS credentials. We're just having, one of the team is just working on allowing people to ask questions for everyone. So the question is, how does this differ from the AWS CDK in the case of AWS? So the CDK will allow you to create your infrastructure as code using real languages, but that will actually emit CloudFormation templates, and you still have to deploy your CloudFormation templates. Pulumi doesn't in any way touch CloudFormation. What it actually does is it interacts with the APIs of the cloud themselves. So it doesn't need that intermediate step of generating the CloudFormation template, and then you deploy the CloudFormation template. It does this automatically. Python. Can we see other participants' questions? Michael, yes, we are working on that right now. So we will be able to try and open these questions for other people to see. Question from Jonathan Greenwood. We would like to be able to use F#. Yes, we have F# support, but we do not have the labs set up for F# right now. I'm sure if we ask Mikhail Shilkov, who's one of the team and one of the staff members on the line, I'm sure he will actually be able to help you there, because this is something that Mikhail does a lot of. What about a workshop in DigitalOcean? Nice question, Vincent. We will be able to set that up. If you're interested in doing that as part of the labs, I can work with you on that, because I know DigitalOcean quite well. Can you use free tier stuff from AWS? Yes, this workshop is set up for free tier stuff. Is Pulumi free and open source? Yes, Pulumi, everything you see today is free and is open source. Pulumi itself is an open source product. Everything we do is an open source. Where Pulumi has pricing is when you use the Pulumi SaaS to store your state. So our infrastructure has state because we need to know what is managed. And by default, Pulumi will, when you create an account on Pulumi, it will be a single user account that is for free. If you need to have multiple users using your same account, you would need to upgrade to a team account, and that's when Pulumi will have a cost. Now, if you want to test Pulumi in a different way, you can actually use an S3 or a GCP bucket or an Azure Blob Storage backend, which it doesn't, talk to the Pulumi backend or the Pulumi SaaS at any time. But there are some limitations of that, which are that you don't get locking. So we do not support locking out of the box. You would need to implement your own locking for your state. Will I be demonstrating Crosswalk today? Yes, I can demonstrate Crosswalk. I can actually add some demos in here. I will post a link to the GitHub, and I have just posted a link to everyone where the GitHub repository and the workshop is, and I'll come back and answer some more questions in a second. So there are 3 workshops that we're going to talk about today. Let me just try and promote the link. So we are going to have Lab 1, which is our modern infrastructure as code. We're going to have Lab 2, which is provisioning EC2 virtual machines. And we're going to have Lab 3, which will be deploying containers to ECS. So this will allow you to get into a progressing level of difficulty as we go through learning the basics of Pulumi. So Lab 1 will allow you to get up and started with Pulumi very easily, and it will allow you to understand the basics of how stacks work and how configuration as code works. Lab 2 will introduce the concepts of compute, and Lab 3 will introduce a little bit more level of resources so that different things happen. If you manage to get through a lot faster, you can start to take advantage of Lab 4 and Lab 5, but they are actually only implemented in TypeScript and today. Does Pulumi use the Terraform provider when talking to AWS? So great question, and that came from Steen. Pulumi actually will generate the CRUD-based system using the Terraform providers under the hood, and we don't make any secret of that. It's open source and you can see it. We actually use it in order to generate our CRUD schemas, but you do not need the the Terraform providers on your local machine. Pulumi handles all of that for you. Is Rust support coming in the future? I cannot commit to that. If you open an issue, this is a question by David. If you open an issue on Pulumi and you add an issue that requests Rust support, we can actually see if there's some community want for Rust support, and we can maybe evaluate it then. Do we plan to support Ruby? This is Narendra. If again there is an issue already open for Ruby support in Pulumi repo, if you can go and give that a +1 and add your use case, then hopefully we can understand people's use case of it. Does it matter if I do the Azure Labs rather than AWS Labs? So this is a question by Christopher. No, you can certainly do the Azure Labs, but a lot more of it will be free flowing because we haven't pre-prepared those labs. If you're happy to do those labs in C#, then please do. Will this workshop demo on AWS Cloud? Yes, it does by default, Narendra. Somebody has asked, we're looking for Pulumi 2.0. When can we expect this to be released? So Pulumi 2.0 is certainly in flight, and we hope to have a beta of our Pulumi 2.0 in the coming days. Would it be okay to try out the labs using GCP? I've done some exploration of Pulumi before this, and my organization is GCP. Johan, please do if you're interested in using GCP. And if you want to, you can send some pull requests to this infrastructure as code workshop repository with any GCP code that you're interested in open sourcing. Question, when will Crosswalk for Python be available? I don't know the official date on that, to be totally honest with you, but Anya, if you open an issue on Pulumi, you can request that information. Is Pulumi feasible for an org in production even without the SaaS non-free features? Curious. There are, I don't know how many people to be, we don't track anyone who are using the open source backends, so we don't actually know how many people are it's down to the organization and the people themselves. So we don't know if it's a lot of people or a few people or anything, but yes, it's very feasible to use Pulumi even without the SaaS features. So we can get started. If anybody can, I don't know if you're able to write some messages in chat to say that you're getting started with the labs, but I'll continue answering questions as we go through. So I'm going to give a quick demonstration of Pulumi right now. So what I'm going to do is Pulumi is CLI. So if I type Pulumi, you will see that there are a number of CLI versions of a number of CLI commands available. So we can actually start and scaffold a Pulumi application using the command Pulumi new. rf TypeScript, make their TypeScript. So if I run the command Pulumi new, it will actually ask me what type of application that I want to scaffold. So today I'm going to show you very quickly how to scaffold an AWS TypeScript application. And if we hit enter, it will ask us for a project name. So we can say demo1, demo1 workshop. I have set up many demos in the past, so you'll have to excuse that. I know this one doesn't exist. You can give it a description. We can have a name that goes with it. And because I've said AWS, it will actually ask us which region we want to deploy into. Today, I'm going to say EU West 1 because I'm currently in Ireland, and it will give me the best latency. And we will be able to see in my IDE in a second. It's downloading NPM packages, so it'll take a second. But in my IDE, I will be able to see that it has generated a number of different things. So it has generated a gitignore file. It has generated index.ts, which we'll come back to in a second. It has generated our package.json, which is our dependencies for our project. It has generated pulumi.yaml, which is just a top level application metadata. And it has given the best practice around TSC config, tsconfig. So it has also generated this idea of pulumi.dev.yaml. Because I started with Pulumi called a stack called dev, it will allow me to create different stacks with different regions. So right now I'm saying EU West 1, so my dev YAML has EU West 1. Out of the box, Pulumi has scaffolded an S3 bucket. So we have names, but this is TypeScript, so other code will look slightly different. But we have actually namespaced our code into the different pieces of what AWS say. So AWS dot, I can see ALBs, I can see app mesh, I can see backup, I can see auto scaling, I can see CloudFront, CloudFormation, cloud build, blah, blah, blah. So today we're actually taking advantage of S3, and we can say S3 dot bucket, and we will give it a name. So we're going to say IAC demo, and then we're going to export the ID of the name of the bucket. So if I go back to the CLI, I can say Pulumi up, and Pulumi up will actually tell me what it's going to do in advance. So the first thing it says it's going to do is it's going to create stack, because stack is like this top level organization, that a way of organizing your code, because it currently doesn't exist. And then it's going to tell me it's going to create a bucket. Now, if I look at the details of the bucket, we will see a number of different things. Firstly, we will see that it's defaulted to ACL private. But secondly, you will see that it is going to create a bucket with a prefix. I said that it would, a suffix, excuse me. I said that the bucket should be called I am demo, but Pulumi tries to, by default, add an auto-generated string to your resource so that you can actually create new resources before deleting them. We can turn this off, and we can take advantage of the arguments that get passed in. And I can say bucket, and I can say, oh, I don't want that as an I am demo, I want that as an IAC demo. And now if I go back and say Pulumi up, it will actually keep the name of IAC demo, and we have overridden Pulumi and told it not to do the auto naming. It'll just take a second again, and I can say yes, and we will see that we have created a bucket. That one already exists because it's shared within our organization. This one definitely won't exist. And we can see that it's told us again that it's actually going to change, or excuse me, create, and the stack is unchanged because it's idempotent and it can run again and again. And now it should actually create our S3 bucket. And we can actually see our S3 bucket has been created. So I told you infrastructure as code allows you to run the same code again and again. If I run Pulumi up, then Pulumi up will show us that there are no changes because the code has not changed. And it is safe to run it as many times as you want. Now let's add something else in here. So let's say we want to tag the bucket. I can say tags, and I can say owner, stack 72, and I can say purpose, demo, and I can say place is webinar, whatever you like, whatever you want to do in here. So again, if I say Pulumi up, it will tell us that the only thing that needs to change in this bucket right now is that there's a difference of tags. We can have a look at the details and we can actually see that it's going to create all of the tags that we have specified. We can say yes. And it'll finish adding the tags. And we can see it's updated. It hasn't changed anything on the bucket apart from the tags. And then lastly, we can actually Pulumi destroy, and it will tell us what the different pieces of destroy are. So it tells us it's going to delete 2 resources because we're destroying everything in the stack, which will be the bucket and the stack. You can have a look at the details. So it's not going to delete anything that is currently not managed. And I can promise you that there are hundreds of S3 buckets in my account that I'm talking to. But because we have the state that it needs to delete or that it is currently managing, it will only delete those and we can destroy it as expected. There we go. So we have nothing in our stack right now. And if I Pulumi stack export, so we can have a look at our state at any point, we can see that there are no resources that are managed in here. We only have this idea of where the state is actually being controlled from. So I'm going to let everyone I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to let people do the labs, and I'm going to go back and answer some questions. And if you have something that you want to talk about, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. And you can actually ask your question in person rather than typing the question out. I think there were a few questions. It looks like the hands have disappeared. If you were going to ask a question, you can try again. Okay, so there's a question in Slack by Miko. At present, they use AWS spec for their functional testing. It will be good if they can consolidate this into whatever language our project is in. How does Pulumi functional test their infrastructure? So there are a number of different articles, Mikhail, for this. Firstly, you can take advantage of using, it depends on your language really. Out of the box, we support the general testing tools. So for example, you can functional test your TypeScript code using Mocha and Chai. You can test your Go code using GoTest. You can use, I can't remember, Mikhail might be able to tell you what you can use in .NET because I don't write in .NET. And there are people using Python, like the testing tools in Python as well. So in TypeScript, you can actually take advantage of Mocha and Chai. And if there is a blog post on this, and if I show you what you can do right here, it is somewhere here, I promise. There we go. So unit testing your infrastructure using Mocha and Chai, and you can actually write specs that will allow you to test all of the different pieces. So I'm going to link that in the workshop channel just so that you can actually see what's going on in there, and hopefully that helps you. Hi, Karun. Karan, you can ask your question.
Yeah. Hi, this is Karunaharan from Stockholm, Sweden. We are successfully using Pulumi in our organization, which is 3, and we find it really useful and constructive as well. We use TypeScript in order to achieve the infrastructure building part. We actually create a cluster through TypeScript coding. We end up facing a cluster being created with a default Windows profile. Every time we build the cluster, we end up having the Windows profile being updated all the time. We would like to disable this behavior so we don't find this at any point in time. So how do you have any suggestions on this for us?
So I guess without seeing your code, it's difficult for me to understand what is continually trying to change. So if you want to, in the community Slack that people are joining, if you can go in there, you can actually post, you can DM me the code, and I can have a look and see why you're continually trying to changes, and I can make the suggestion of what's potentially incorrect.
Okay, yeah, we'll try to make use of a Slack channel then. Yeah.
Yes. So I posted a link in the chat, and or excuse me, Mikhail posted it, which is our community Slack, and you can actually go in there and try and see what's wrong.
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Thanks.
That was helpful.
No.
Yeah.
Hi, I think it's Chukri.
Yeah. Yes. Hello.
Yeah. Hi there.
All right. So I'm also a happy Pulumi user, but I have a few questions that I mean, so far my research didn't answer me yet on Google. The first one is, for example, when I create a Kubernetes cluster with Pulumi, you have, of course, the default namespace and stuff like that. And if you are using other for example, Istio and a couple of other tools, they need some labels to be set. And yeah, I couldn't find a way to, usually with Pulumi, you can import resources, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and this is my first question. How can I import the default namespace so I can set its labels? And second question is, so when I use the Helm chart in Pulumi, basically Pulumi just, let's say, dry install and then gets the templates out of the Helm and then apply them directly to the cluster. This is what I understand from how Pulumi works with Helm, but I feel like doesn't feel very right to have two layers on that. So because we already have the Helm chart for our services, is there a better way to do the deployment without Helm, or I'm not sure if I'm using the right let's say practice to deploy. This is my second question.
So
yeah.
Yes, you don't need to use Helm with Pulumi. So Pulumi has its own built-in way of deploying. So
okay.
If I show you very quickly, so there are not, which language are you using Pulumi with? TypeScript?
TypeScript.
Okay, cool. So Pulumi Crosswalk, Kubernetes Crosswalk will actually help you here. So if I show you that, you can actually, I've just opened an article on my screen, and you can see where we have taken this YAML that has actually been created from Helm, and we have actually simplified it using a number of different methods. But the one that you're actually looking for right now is kx.deployment, where you can actually pass in your spec and you can link it to the pod builder above, and that's what will do your deployment. So you don't actually need to use Helm in order to do it. Pulumi has native methods that will allow you to talk directly to Kubernetes.
Yep. And what about the default namespace or whatever default resource that Kubernetes creates? What's the way to import them and then maybe modify them or something like that?
Got it. So each in TypeScript specifically, each each top level class has 3 parameters. Okay, so we have name, we have arguments, we have this third one, which is called custom resource options. Okay, and custom resource options will allow you to run an import, and that is where you would actually be able to import specifically your default namespace, and it would allow you to be able to manage it that way. So if I'm trying to think of.
Okay.
Sorry, go on.
Can you point me to the documentation where I can look for more on that?
I certainly will.
Because
I certainly will. I will link you to the
Okay.
documentation directly. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks. Hey, Chukri, did you have another question, or did you just not lower your hand?
No. But just I'm not seeing your screen. Like, is that in purpose or having problem with my loader?
No, I've stopped sharing
Uh,
just because I'm answering questions here. I'm just
okay,
answering
great.
questions.
Yeah, sure.
No worries.
And
Thank
I
you.
will get I will get the link on somewhere in the go to webinar page, or where
The
or you
link
will show it on your
for
screen.
the
Yes.
link for what? Sorry, for which?
For the import resource
I will
thingy.
I will post it. I will post it in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, that would be nice. Thanks.
Okay. No worries.
Okay, cool.
Hi, is it Prem? Have you got a question? Hi, Karen. You got a question?
Yeah, I've got one more question. This is regarding Helm short installation. We are trying to achieve it through Pulumi itself. We see the custom resource definitions of that particular chart is not being installed. Is it something that you would be fixing soon, or
I'm really sorry.
custom resource
resource
definitions
definition.
of Kubernetes, they are not being installed.
Oh, is that a bug? Can you open a bug on Pulumi-Kubernetes repo, and we can have somebody look into that this week.
Yeah, that would be really great. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that bug. I didn't realize there was a bug there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Shukri, have you got another question?
Yep, I just sent the link. I asked the question actually on Slack a couple of days ago.
Okay.
It's about, so let me explain. In our services, we need to mount like the root certificate as the same as in any browser, like in Firefox or wherever. So I need to mount it as a config map in a certain path. And unfortunately, the root certificate is so huge, and it seems like from the way I understand it, Pulumi uses apply to add and modify resources on the cluster. And while using apply, it seems like in Kubernetes there is a thing called last state about the resource, and it has certain like size, and the config map exceeded that size. Is there a way to tell Pulumi to use create, or how I get around this issue?
Okay, it certainly sounds as though because the size has exceeded, that sounds like a bug in how our provider is talking to our engine and gRPC. The best thing to do there is to open an issue, and we should be able to raise the size, which will allow you to be able to push a bigger response from the provider to the engine.
It seems like yeah, from my research, it seems like a Kubernetes issue, like with that. Yeah, but let me. I can also raise this issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, as that's a specific limitation in the Kubernetes system, then it's probably best to open an issue and ask the question as to what is the best way around that. Okay.
Oh, nice. Thanks.
No worries.
Yeah, that.
Oh, I unmuted you very fast there. I'm really sorry. What were you going to say?
Yeah, that's it. I will just conclude. That's all from my side.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks.
So I'm not sure if anyone's actually making their way through the labs right now. If you are, can you post in chat or send a question or something so that we understand what you're up to? Okay, so there are some people going through the labs right now. It looks like, Greg, you're stuck on step 2 at lab 4. Can you, is there any problems with it? I see another hand for Jukri.
Yes. So the link that you send me is I tried this method before, and
Yep.
actually to import a resource you need to specify the ID of it, right? And the question is how I can know the ID of the default namespace if I didn't import it yet.
Got
So
it.
by
Got
the
it. I understand what you're saying right now. So you don't know what the namespace is. You actually, okay. Leave that one with me, and I promise I will post an answer into the workshop Slack, so that
okay.
I get the correct answer for you. Okay. I think I know what it is, but I need to verify that's the case.
Oh, nice. Thanks. Because I tried to import with the name of the namespace like default, but it doesn't seem to get it. Like a Pulumi complains, it says like I couldn't find anything with that ID.
Got it.
So,
Got it.
yeah.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Leave that one with me. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Karun Karen. A question?
Yeah, so sorry, probably the last question.
Yes, no worries.
I understand that Pulumi provides policy as code out of the box. My question here is, how different is it from the cloud provider policies, say for instance, ORBAC access policies or something like that?
Okay, great question. So, policy as code will adhere to, it will actually allow you to write policies against the specific code that you're writing. So,
yeah,
to paraphrase that, so what policy as code is a way of actually stopping bad infrastructure as code making its way to your cloud. It's not like RBAC based stuff or things like that. You would be able to control your RBAC based policy as code through the Pulumi console and the Pulumi SaaS, but it's very much specifically against the code that you're writing to stop that code going into production.
Okay. Is it basically the policies that you set around the source code?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's great. Yeah.
Yes, and it would your CI/CD pipeline would actually stop code that you don't deem worthy of going into production from going into production when you have policy as code. So like things like, you know, as I said earlier, S3 buckets or Azure blobs that are wide open to the world, your policy as code would stop that happening so that people can't actually download things that they're not supposed to from your system.
Yeah, that makes really complete sense. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, so can anybody tell me if they've managed to finish the first or the second labs? Okay, so very good. Noel has finished lab 1. Anybody managed to finish the compute labs for actually building machines? Excellent. Christopher is managing to get through different pieces. I think it's Nasser has also finished lab 1. Anyone else? Lenny is going on to lab 2 right now. Thanks for joining us, Nasser. So Alex has asked a question in Slack. How would a lab example look if I'd need to update a bucket after I created it, deployed a website and did some checks, then later change existing bucket to have a public website policy? I'm not quite sure what the question is there, Alex. I don't think I follow. If you could give me a little more info, that would be useful. Okay, Alex, I can give you that demo if you want. So right now we have a bucket. Okay, so, and let's just take out some of these custom options. And let's just take out the tags. Okay, so we're going to say that there's a website.
Well, I think you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, yep, you should be able to see right now. Okay.
How I see this.
Okay, cool. So we're going to have a website. And in this case, our index document of the website will be index.html. So let's create a folder called site, and let's create a file called index.html, as we did in the demo. And I'm going to say h1, and we're just going to say hello world. So then we have a bucket object. And we have the bucket that goes with that, which will be bucket. And we have an ACL, which will be public read. And we have a content type. I'm just going to set hard code this rather than actually look through it. Text-html, excuse me. And then lastly, we have a source, which will be a new Pulumi.asset.file archive, excuse me, asset, which will point to path.join, which will be site and index.html. And we can run this. I'm just going to skip the preview because I know this should work for me. So it's going to create the bucket. It's going to create the bucket object. This is brand new. I had destroyed everything before. It should finish fast if you just give it a second. So we've created our bucket. Now we're creating our bucket object, and we have the website endpoint. And if I curl the website endpoint, I should get hello world. There we go. So we actually see what's going on. So we're up to everything we need. So now we can actually say ACL here, and we can say public read or whatever it needs to be. And the flow would just be, again, another Pulumi up, which would tell us exactly what's going to happen. In this case, all it's going to do is change the ACL on the bucket from private to public read. We can see that right here. The ACL goes from private to public read, and we say yes. And we just keep iterating on the infrastructure as you need to. Does that answer your question, Alex? Not exactly. Okay. So I'm going to unmute you, Alex, and then that way you can at least talk with me so we can understand, if that's cool. If you raise your hand in the webinar, then I can unmute the correct person. Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey. So like what I mean is like you go and change here the original definition of the bucket, and then you deploy the stack again.
Oh, the bucket.
I mean, what if I need to
region.
set the? Yeah, like what if I need to set the ACL as part of the logic of part of the flow, okay, that my deployment does, not upfront here, right? But at a later stage. Okay, let's say that
so you
after you create a bucket, you deploy content on the bucket, then you need to create YAML roles, then you need to run some tests on the content, maybe call some CDN API to purge whatever it has currently, and only then open this bucket for public access.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. So based on tests, you would want to actually set
later on in the pipeline, when everything is green and third party is notified, CDN is clean, only then I want to open the origin.
Got it. So programmatically, you're not going to be able to do that right now, only because Pulumi is a CLI-based like application. There's no SDK that you can call to change the Pulumi code via an SDK and run it as part of an SDK. I'm not quite sure.
But like, I mean, like later on, can I like go later on here in this script and do bucket dot set properties?
Yeah, you can't do that specifically in this code.
Just decorate the object with more properties.
It would still require Pulumi to actually be run as a Pulumi up phase, so like a CLI Pulumi up, because we don't support like setting it any other way right now. It's an interesting use case. If you could you open
like can I, for example, can I run a separate GitHub action later on to change this definition of this bucket or any other resource? Let's say
like what you could do here, just a suggestion, you could say constant config equals new pulumi.config, and you could say constant ACL equals config.get, and we can say ACL state. And then in here, you can actually say ACL equals, it would be ACL or like private. So what it would do is this would effectively say is that if there is a config value set for ACL, then set it in the pipeline. If it's not set, then default to private. And you could actually have in your CLI, once your Pulumi application has passed all its tested, you can have a GitHub action which will set the config value, and the next Pulumi up will actually be able to set your ACL based on that.
Okay, so I will have a GitHub action that calls Pulumi config
set
to set the value, and then Pulumi up.
Yes, and that would do it that way.
All right, that works. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Hi, Andrea. Have you got a question? No question from Andrea. Chukri, have you got another question? I'm just unmuting you right now. Chukri.
Yep. So maybe this one is a little bit specific, but in some of my services, I'm also dealing with TLS certificates, and so basically we created a service that plays around with it can inject sidecars to our services with a specific certificate, let's say. And in order for that to work, I need to generate a certificate with a CSR config. And I do that with OpenSSL right now. And I found out that Pulumi also has a TLS library, but can I just, like, I mean, instead of because there is some limitation. I couldn't set some values and stuff like that. Can I just pass my config to the TLS library that Pulumi have? Or yeah, this is my question. Like,
so the TLS library is probably used in order to manage it all itself, right? So you would like be able to generate your own self-issued certificates that way. You probably wouldn't be able to do it based on your own CSR. What you would have to do here is you would have to use what's called Pulumi dynamic providers, where you can actually implement your own CRUD functionality. And inside the create, you can actually have it talk to your CSR in order to generate a certificate. So here you can shell out using your CLI, or you can use an API call, and you would be able to do your own custom logic in there. Which will allow you to generate your own certificate and then bring that out of the dynamic provider and pass it into the next resource along the line.
Yep, we'll check that out. So basically, I will extend the class or the library implementing this, right?
If I show you right now, you can still see my screen, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, so we only have one example right now of a dynamic resource, which is for interacting with CDNs in Azure. Okay. But what you'll see is that you create your resource group, you create your account, you create your container and your CDN profile and your endpoint. And then we actually shell out to this idea where we've got a CDN custom domain resource. And inside your own custom domain resource, here you can actually create your own code, which will allow you to go off and validate your custom domain and actually be able to do enable any specific interaction that is not supported directly out of the box with your with Pulumi. So here is where you will be able to shell out and call your CSR and say, give me a certificate back. And then based on that, you can actually provide the response as the output from the custom, from the dynamic resource, and you would be able to bring that inside your Pulumi resource.
Okay, makes sense. So this is an example, and if I would like to know more about it, there is more docs.
Yeah, so there is in the programming model, I believe we have dynamic. There we go. There is a section on dynamic providers in our programming model docs, which will allow you to understand how to create your own individual dynamic resource and what the API looks like for it.
Oh, thank you very much. I will have a look at that.
No worries.
Yep.
I still see a hand up from Andrea. Andrea, do you have a question? You are self-muted.
No, okay, not for now, thank you. It's okay.
Hi there.
Okay.
Oh, no question. Okay. Okay. No worries.
Okay, maybe because my hand it is up now. I
Raised.
think. Okay.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you. No worries. No worries. Thank you. Okay, so we're like an hour and a little bit in. Has anyone managed to get on finish lab 2? Okay, lab 2 is done by a few people. Anyone managed to get on to lab 3? Oh, wow. Somebody's actually already on lab 4. Very good. I presume that's a TypeScript lab for them. We have a question from Marcin.
Yes, actually, I posted those questions on Slack, but it's like about how fast you are getting support for some EKS features. Like, for example, I posted two specific questions. There is things that, for example, may have already be in CloudFormation or not. And one is this envelope encryption, and another one is private API endpoints for the API servers. How does it
great question.
work?
Great question. So as I said earlier, you may not have heard it. Pulumi generates the CRUD actions based on the Terraform provider. So if the Terraform provider supports it, then we in Pulumi will support it within a matter of hours. If it is not supported within Terraform, and it's something you really need to do, and there is an API endpoint for it in the AWS SDK, you can actually call out to the SDK from your code and actually enable the different endpoints for it. So you can either do that in a dynamic provider, as I demoed or as I spoke about before, or you can actually call directly the SDK required and actually set the value from the SDK because you have code, and you can actually interact with the API directly from your code. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I have maybe just one quick question related to this.
Of course.
In Terraform, you need to be like very careful about versioning. I mean, basically of the Terraform itself, because then, I mean, if the state changes, then you cannot go back, and you have to like update all the Terraform that you run from everywhere. So is Pulumi also like, I mean, may have this problem, or the state is somehow handled differently? I mean, basically, just if I update one of the providers, like by mistake, do also everyone else has to catch up with those changes?
Got it. Okay, so I can show you. The Pulumi state is different. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. So our state, our URNs for our individual pieces are actually a little different, which makes life a little easier here. So our URN is URN Pulumi, and then we have the name of the stack, we have the name of the project, and then we have the type of the object, and then we actually have like the naming of the object. So we're not really hard coded to a specific version or anything like that. So you can update things independently, and you can actually be able to, it's a little easier to rename objects and refactor objects and move things around. And we actually have this idea in our SDK called alias, where even if you do rename it, you can actually add the old alias in here, and it will not recreate the object. So let's pretend I have renamed from IAC demo to something else. Then I can actually put like the equivalent of IAC demo in here, whatever the resource alias was in here. And this one would be like test, and Pulumi will be able to understand that it has moved and it has changed, and not to change it because it has like, it understands the relationships of the old code. Marcin?
Yeah,
is that okay?
I was actually thinking about something else, about updates to the like individual modules that we are using, whether this introduces, you know, some backwards incompatible changes. But it's
so like a specific version of
whether
like,
this
so
can
let's
result in
pretend like your code here is using like version 1.1 of Pulumi AWS, and you need 1.2, then you need to do it for everything inside your application, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Actually, no, you could, you would need to do it. I don't know how individual, if you were using Go, then you could like version it individually. I'm not sure about other languages, to be totally honest with you, how it would happen. Maybe if you, so you've posted this in the workshop channel in Slack, right? So we can have a look at this and we can actually see
Of course.
if there's a way around this for you, okay? I have a question from Chukri.
Actually, I didn't raise anything. Maybe it's a shortcut, but yeah, I'm writing a question on Slack. So let me finish it. Maybe it's better to see it on Slack. Then yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to finishing here. Somebody's waiting on a t-shirt. Andrea's waiting on a t-shirt here. I have no physical swag. I am stuck in Ireland right now. I'm not at home. Otherwise, I would happily be able to send you some things. Has anyone finished all the labs? I think we're getting close to running out of time. We have like 20 minutes left. If anybody has any last questions, probably now is the time to start asking the questions. Looks like Srini's finished all of the demos, all of the labs. Thank you. We got a lot of people finishing right now. Oh yeah. So Mikhail wants a demo of Crosswalk. So I can demo this. Let me just destroy what's currently in my application. So Crosswalk. I'm just opening some examples here. Okay, so Crosswalk is this idea where we have created some opinionated APIs over the top of all the different things. So let's pretend if we weren't using Crosswalk, I needed a VPC, I'd need to do a new AWS VPC, ec2.vpc, and I would need to create subnets. There's new AWS ec2.subnet. Excuse me. And so on and so forth. And I would need to create all the different resources. So Crosswalk makes this a little easier. So let's say that we want to load balance, or excuse me, create a VPC that sits across multiple availability zones. Then I'm actually going to wrap this in async because I actually want Pulumi to go off and do some work before it actually read the data source back before it actually goes and creates new things. So I can say constant AZs equals new equals, excuse me, await AWS.
Screen again.
Oh, there we go. Thanks, Mikael. So first thing we can do is we can go off and get our availability zones. And then based on getting our availability zones, we can say const VPC equals new AWS X dot ec2 dot VPC. Okay, so here we're going to say my VPC. Now, if I run this code right now, what it's actually going to do, it will create, so just in this single line of code right here, this AWS X EC2 VPC, it will create a number of resources, or it will tell us it will create a number of resources. So it's hidden away a lot of the different pieces of it. You know what? I'm just going to take it out of async for now. I want you to see what it's actually doing here. And it will tell me, come on. You can see it's actually wrapped all these resources. So by default, it will give us the internet gateway. It'll give us a public subnet. It'll give us a private subnet. It'll give us the route table association. It will give us a NAT gateway. It will give us an elastic IP, and it will actually plumb everything together. So out of that top level, one line of code, it will allow us to create a complete setup of our VPC adhering to the best defaults, what's going on inside AWS. Now, if I want to extend that, I can actually say, firstly, I can give it a CIDR block. So I'll give it 10.10.0.0/16, just to show that it's actually changed. I can enable DNS host names across the VPC. I can enable DNS support across the VPC. I can actually say, this is where I can turn around and I can say const AZs equals AWS.get availability zones. Here I can say the number of availability zones that I want to balance across. By default, it's all. That's excuse me, it's one in here. So I can actually say azs.names.length. And now it's going to balance across all of the availability zones in this get availability zones call. So I know in EU West 1 it'll be 3. Then I can say the number of NAT gateways. So I want 1 per availability zone. Again, can be zones.names.length. And then I can create subnets. So subnets is a collection, and I can say that I want to create a type, and I want there to be public subnets, which will have a CIDR mask of 24. And we want them to be named public. And then I can also create a type of subnet, which will be private. Here it'll be a CIDR mask of 20. And we can also say that the name of those should be private. So just by extending the code, if I go back now and I say Pulumi up, it was 31 resources before. Now we should see a lot more resources being created because we've created extra NAT gateways, extra elastic IPs, and extra subnets and routes and route table associations. And we should see a lot more resources that are actually being created. So there you go, 44 resources, and in a very short amount of code. So it's like 15 lines, 16 lines of code. We've been able to scaffold our entire VPC with all the subnets, all the routes, all the route table associations, the internet gateways, the NAT gateways, and the public IPs. I hope that answers your question, Miko. In fact, I'm going to unmute you and you can tell me. Or Alex, sorry, not Mikael, Alex. Alex, does that answer your question?
Yeah. I was going also to ask about the CIDR blocks, to answer that too.
Yeah, so we can set them.
So I don't have collision with if I have site-to-site VPN and stuff.
Yes, so we can actually have a look. So the CIDR blocks in here, it will, based on, you see that it's done /24 for the subnets because I've asked the public subnets to be /24 and I've asked for the private subnets to be /20. So it's going to control them that way.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
So we have a few minutes left if anyone has any last questions. I have 2 hands raised. So Marcin, question?
A quick question. So I can see that there's a next workshop, and I think this requires EKS setup. Is that correct? We won't be doing EKS with Pulumi, or you won't be showing that.
So it's all included. So basically everything in the infrastructure as code workshops. There's 5. There's the basic setup, then there's compute, then there's ECS, then there's EKS, and then there's serverless. And this one was sort of taking us through the compute. And if anyone wanted to do the ECS, then they can do it. But otherwise, there will be other webinars that go into other more in-depth pieces.
Yeah, because I can see that there is another one that is planned, I think in a week or something like this, or a bit more. And this one, does it require EKS setup or not? This is my question.
Oh, so next week's is going to be talking about more advanced use cases around deploying into EKS and so on. So yes, it will require that.
Okay.
Question from Mikael. You are muted. You have muted yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Right, awesome. So what's I'm a sysadmin, so not a sort of native developer, but what's the best way to sort of explore the Pulumi SDK or libraries, as it were, to find out what's available, particularly for creating things with Crosswalk? How do you do it yourself?
Interesting. So Crosswalk, as of today, as of the 30th of March, is only available in TypeScript. We are trying to make that no longer be the case. We're trying to make Crosswalk available in all languages. We may not make it as part of our 2.0, but we're continually trying to go there. The documentation for Crosswalk is available, but the best thing to do would be to look at some of the examples in the Pulumi. So Pulumi.com. Actually, let me just share my screen. You see my screen right now?
Yep.
So if you go to the Pulumi AWS X repo and inside Node.js, you'll see all of the different namespaces that are available in here. So we have pieces for SQS, SNS, RDS, Lambda. Not everything is available because Crosswalk is being created like piece by piece rather than like auto scripted and auto generated, because it has to adhere to like the best practices of Amazon. But it is something that's there. It's something that's being developed continually. And if there's something actually missing or you need to ask an individual question, the best thing to do is just raise an issue in the repo, and you'll be able to get an answer that way.
Okay, yeah, good, thank you.
No worries. Okay, guys, we have 10 minutes left. If anyone has any last questions. I have another question from Chukri, is that right?
I don't know if there is a shortcut doing this raising hands, but yeah, I got a response to my question from a guy from Mikael. So
okay, perfect,
so
perfect.
Thanks, Mikael.
Marcin, you got a question?
I have one, and I also posted this on Slack actually, because if I remember well, at the beginning of the workshop, you say that different developers may have different stacks, like but reuse the same code. Is this correct? If I
yes, yes. So if I show you right now, so here you'll see Pulumi stack ls. So we can list the stacks that are available. We can see that dev is there, and I now can Pulumi stack init, and I can say test, and I can say Pulumi stack ls. I can see that there are two stacks. One of them, test, is currently selected, and I can Pulumi stack select dev to move back to the dev stack, and I can actually rev the code independently, like bring it up and down independently of each other.
Yeah, so now the question is, those stacks, now you own like two of the stacks, they have like a different state, each of them, or this is a shared state?
It's completely different state. So yeah, they're in the state is completely independent of each other.
Okay, so now, so the question is, how do you because I imagine, you know, we have a like large project, large stack, and if someone wants to actually change something there, so if you have like different developers working on the same resource, and I mean, I imagine that they would need to somehow use the same name of the resource. You somehow have a fixed name of the resource, and then I don't know if there's any way to prevent, you know, stepping on each other's toes, like when trying things from different branches, or
so it's a great question. There certainly is a way of doing that. So if I show you, we can create like test infra.ts. Oh, excuse me. And here I can say class X implements Pulumi.custom. Wait. If I import star as Pulumi from @Pulumi, and here we can actually say, so let's pretend this is in a different repository completely. We can actually implement the Pulumi component resource, and inside the component resource, we can have our constructor, and we can have the different code. And instead of putting everything in the same code, we can actually say constant x equals new x. So we're actually calling out to that library. Actually, let's make it. Yeah. So you can have a versioned library that you can call out to, and you can pass in any constructors and anything like that. This separate library you can actually version in its own way, and then that way each and every individual developer can upgrade to the different version of the code as they see, so they can actually opt into the upgrade rather than actually being forced to do the upgrade, and that way they can still completely independently of each other rev their stacks. Does that answer your question, Marcin?
I was rather thinking like if someone you know, because I imagine some of those changes or larger projects, there will be maybe many of them, or like in order to develop like the code, you have to try several times to see what you get from the details, whether this is what
that doesn't answer your question, Martin. You can post in Slack and
I think it's still there. So maybe maybe that's.
Mikael, do you still have a question?
Oh no, sorry. I'll put it down. There you go.
Okay, no worries. Martin, I could see you were trying to speak back to me. I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened there.
Well, no, I'm just saying that, I mean, the question is there. It's just rather like concurrent updates on the same resource. I mean, how this problem can be solved, because I think this may happen if you have several people and just by mistake, I'm just looking for some kind of protection against this, and what's the best setup to achieve that.
Got it. So this is actually why, this is one of the reasons why the auto naming exists, so that if there are multiple people working on the stack at the same time, or multiple stacks actually providing the same resources, so Pulumi will actually rename the resources. So this is where I showed earlier. So we have constant bucket equals new AWS S3.bucket. So we say my bucket. So it auto names. So here it's actually going to be my bucket dash. Let's just pretend it's like a small string. Each individual developer will get their own random suffix, and they won't actually clash using the same bucket name.
Yeah, but I say what I want to say, that I have just one production bucket and I want to change something on this bucket. I mean, I don't want to create a new one. I just, I need something that is shared actually, and I want to have like some kind of protection that someone, different people do just at the same time changes to this resource.
Oh, I see what you mean. So you want state level locking. That's only available in the Pulumi SaaS. It's not available in the open source backends. But if I actually, two people using the SaaS can't actually make the same call at the same time, because Pulumi will say there's an operation in update, and it will stop both people trying to do the same thing to the same bucket.
Okay, and this happens at what level? You say at the API calls level, or I mean,
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I can try and let me just stop sharing my screen so that I don't show you my credentials quickly. Okay, if you can see my screen again right here. So I don't know if it's going to be fast enough to be able to do this. Pulumi stack select dev Pulumi up. This is where this doesn't work and it embarrasses me. There you go. So you'll see it's actually running in this window right here, and you'll see that there's a 409. Another update is currently in progress, because two updates at the same time can't happen using the Pulumi SaaS.
Yeah, but this is the same stack.
Yes.
So what I was like referring to was this initial comment that you made, that different developers may have different stacks.
Yes, but you wouldn't have individual developers having different stacks of the same production stack, because they're different resources. So each developer would have to effectively log in to the production stack and be able to update it that way.
Okay.
So let's think of developers having their own stack being their own individual development stack, not an individual version of the production stack, because that would be different stacks at that point, because there will be different state.
Yeah, but is there any way to like enforce this? Because there can always happen like that someone just doesn't know that he creates actually something that corresponds to the production resource. I don't know if this is like something that it's already has been noticed, or
I've personally, but I've never ran into that specific use case. I think that would be sort of more like a workflow within your company. I don't think there's anything in Pulumi that can stop that. I guess the only thing, if you're using the SaaS, would be that you can use RBAC in order to stop individual people updating individual projects or stacks. So if you have a production stack and you want individual developers not to be able to update it, then they will be put in a group that would stop them from updating it, and only specific people will be able to like promote to production.
Yeah, I'm just thinking
it's about a use case. I can certainly talk more with you about it and see what we can do in order to make your life easier there, and we can work that out for you.
I think this is mostly, I'm not sure exactly, but I'm thinking this is maybe related because I would have maybe many resources that already exist there and will have to be adopted actually. And I don't know if this is like something that when you adopt resources, you somehow need to keep the names or things like this. And then, it's basic. Yeah.
Yes. So you would need to create the name here. So when you import, you can actually say import, and it would be like the name of the bucket. So IAC demo. And if this name doesn't correspond to what Pulumi auto names it, Pulumi will not import it. Pulumi will force you to say, oh, wait a minute, this is actually going to recreate your bucket. So you have to enforce the naming. And then that way, only then will Pulumi be able to import that specific resource in, as long as Pulumi isn't going to destroy it when it brings it in, if that makes more sense.
Yeah, that's right. But if I have like resources like this, and then it's just the question how to organize this. Now that developers, they can have their own version, which I mean, it's kind of like mixture of things that are created by Pulumi and things that are already existing and need to be imported. So
got it. So you're in the community Slack, right? Let's take it to DM in the community Slack, because I think we've run out of time, and I can see if we can come up with a way of organizing it to make that work for you. Is that okay?
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, folks, we have actually run out of time. I think I see a hand up from Chukri for one last question.
No, I just want to say thank you, and yeah, I think we met in Berlin when you did a workshop, if I'm not wrong.
Wonderful. So, yeah. Oh, perfect. So
great.
Yeah, so
thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining. Thanks. If anybody has any other questions, you can sit around in the community Slack and ask as many questions as you need to. The community Slack is actually quite busy, and there's a lot of good information being shared. There are some upcoming webinars after this. So we actually have a webinar on Wednesday in the evening, because it'll be United States time, Washington, where how to create infrastructure specifically in Go. This week, there's also a managing any cloud with .NET. And then next week, we're actually going to have the second part of this workshop, which will be much more advanced infrastructure as code. So how to create more advanced infrastructure. So like creating the infrastructure in Amazon or whatever, and then actually updating it to deploy into Kubernetes and so on and so forth. So there'll be chaining different providers together in order to do that. And then we have some further ones around policy as code and Kubernetes specific workshops. So if anybody has any other questions, please go and post them in the community Slack. And I thank everyone for your time.